You've come to the right place if you're a course creator looking to build more impact, income, and freedom. LMScast is the #1 podcast for course creators just like you. I'm your guide, Chris Badgett. I'm the co-founder of the most powerful tool for building, selling, and protecting engaging online courses called LifterLMS. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMScast. My name's Chris Badgett and I'm joined by two very special guests from WebDevStudios. I've got Lisa Sabin-Wilson and Brad Williams. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
I'm good.
I'm really excited for this conversation. It's always fun for me to interview people that I've known about online for a while that I haven't spent a lot of time with. I've seen you guys on videos. I've followed the progress of WebDevStudios over the years. It's cool to talk to you and in a public format, really geek out about WordPress, working with clients, learning, social stuff. I think it's going to be a great conversation. I'd like to start around the importance of discovery with the client. Some of the people listening to this episode or to the show build sites for clients, or they themselves work at a certain kind of company, and they need to know like what they're dealing with, what they're getting into. Recently, I've spent some time diving into the use cases and business cases of learning management systems. I'm going to list off 8 here. The first one is an expert or guru business. It's kind of the classic, it's really in trend and vogue right now with a course, a membership site based around expertise. Then we have internal training. Then we have blended learning scenarios. Then we have online learning marketplaces, online schools, continuing education, WordPress as a service, and then LMS for product marketing and onboarding. So these are a lot of different use cases. When you guys are working with a client and learning comes on the table, how do you discover that?
Discovery. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to think in general, like how that happens. Generally speaking, when someone reaches out and learning or an LMS or some kind of learning component is a part of the project, we usually know ahead of time because at the very least, by reaching out to us, they give us some insight into high level goals for a project. That's not always the case, right? But generally speaking it is. So we always hop on a call and just like you would any other, lead coming in the door. But once we actually engage with the client, one of the most important steps that we do at this company, no matter what the project is a in-depth discovery. And that, I'll let Lisa talk about that because she really has architected this discovery process that we do at WebDevStudios. Really revamped it completely over the last few years, and honestly, it's a beautiful thing to see it go. So I won't steal your thunder, Lisa. I'll let you touch on how we do discovery.
Thanks, Brad. Discovery is kind of my wheelhouse, my cup of tea. So when somebody does come to us and say they have an LMS, they already have a good idea of what they want to accomplish, right? Whether they want to sell courses, whether they want to have internal private courses for their own staff, whatever. I mean, whatever it is, they already have an idea. So from our standpoint, from an agency standpoint, it's really just pulling that data, those details out of the client's head, like what is the user experience from step 1 to step done, and what are all the steps. So what we do is typically go through all of the different features that are available in an LMS, and by process of elimination, we know what they need, what they don't need. There's course building with an LMS, obviously, when you're with tools for like uploading different file types, like videos, PDFs, links to other content, documents. So what do they need around that? Course progress information, do they need to display to their users, how well they're doing with the course, yes or no? If they do, then we dig into that a little bit more. So we kind of run through the gambit of features available with an LMS. Things like I've already mentioned, student enrollment and management, content dripping, quizzes and tests. Do they need a kind of a social layer on that with BuddyPress or even a forum like BBPress integration? for users to like generate profiles or interact with other users in the network, or for teachers to chat through forums or groups. You know, and we talk about things like reporting. Do they need to be able to report on user activity or progress or types of courses or even financial marketing tools? What kind of automated emails do they need to look at? Payment gateways are another really big question in terms of, you know, how are they selling this? If they're selling this, you know, what type of payment gateway do they want to use? Gamifications and certificates are another feature that we want to talk about. Like there's BadgeOS, and there are different gamification things that can really complement an online learning portal if they need or want to have that. Homework options, you know, should users have the ability to submit homework or assignments, and what's the grading process and all of that. So we really dig into those. And the reason why we go through all of the different features is because, number one, our clients may not know what features are available with WordPress and an LMS. So we may actually say something that sparks some excitement with them that they didn't think about. Like they might think, oh, gamification, that's super cool to be able to encourage people and give them some, you know, achievements for participation. That's another layer that maybe they didn't think about. So that discovery kind of serves two purposes. It gives us the set of requirements that the clients need, and it maybe introduces the client into some different features and ideas that they didn't think about.
You know, one other thing too, it also helps identify kind of where a client's at in their process. Because when they talk about having courses or gamification, like, great, we can absolutely do that. Have you sat down and kind of architected what the courses are going to be? You know, how are they going to be managed? Have you talked about the type of, you know, gamification or achievements that they can earn and how they're going to earn those? Generally speaking, probably at that point, maybe they have a high level idea of some of the things, but they don't have all the details. So it's a good way to help define some homework for the client. Say, okay, great. Let's start, you know, on your side, start thinking about the achievements you want to highlight through gamification. Start thinking about that coursework and how that will look and how we'll present that, because while we can make recommendations, we can't necessarily always answer those questions because it's very dependent on what they're trying to do. So it's a really great process, really thorough process.
Yeah, so if you come to us and say, I want an LMS, expect a lot of questions from us, because that means so many different things.
Well, I got to ask you, Lisa, when you rattled that off, all those features of LMS, how did you become familiar with that suite of like feature sets there?
Through necessity.
Okay.
Right? So, all right, number one, I write books on WordPress, right? I write WordPress for Dummies books, WordPress for Dummies for web design books. So I have to be on top of what's current, what's out there, what features are available in order to speak to that stuff intelligently. So that's number one. Number two, I have to be able to speak intelligently to our clients, right? And to help our development teams through like maybe what they don't know an LMS can do if they don't have, you know, experience with it. So, you know, I think anybody who is a provider of service like we are should be able to speak intelligently to those types of things if that's the service that they're offering.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys do enterprise WordPress development, and if there's somebody listening out there who hasn't quite developed a discovery process or whatever, I'm just curious, how long does it take for you guys, or does it depend on the project? Like like what percentage of an overall project is discovery? Can you just give us a sense of how much you invest in the discovery process?
I mean, every single project has a discovery. And I think with each project, it depends on the scale of the project, really. But I would, and Brad, please step in on this, but I would say 10 to 20% of a project budget is discovery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you know, on average, our discovery is at least a couple weeks. If not 3 to 4 weeks, you know, sometimes even longer if it's a really complex build. Really, it's and the way we really describe it is it needs to take as long as it needs to take, right? Because we like to, the way we describe it to clients is it's the blueprint, right? Like if you're going to have an addition added to your house or build a whole brand new house, cool, let's build a house, right? But we got to sit down and figure out the blueprint of exactly how we're going to build this house, not just what you want, but how are we going to build what you want? You know, what tools are we going to use? You know, what if we're building an LMS, what's the backbone of that? Is it Lifter? Is it something else? And a lot of it through the series of these questions is helping us identify the proper tools, you know, for the job. We're not in the business of reinventing the wheel. I mean, that's why we love WordPress and open source. There's so many great tools out there that can get us so far ahead. We can focus on the, you know, customizing it to really tailor it, but the core of it is done, you know?
Well, I think that's what our clients look at us for, Brad, is really being that expert to consult to help them make that decision.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Before we go into the use case of internal training, a lot of people are looking for a website, but an internal training site is often an intranet site for a company. Can you kind of help somebody who's kind of new to that concept understand what an intranet is?
Sure. I mean, intranets are cool, right? And essentially an intranet is a website that is, you know, locked down. You can only access the site if you have permissions. Usually when someone's saying an intranet, it's like an internal company portal. It's for, you know, all the employees of that company that can access, you know, relevant information, maybe a calendar of events, maybe a personnel directory, things like that. So it's essentially, it's a website at the end of the day. It's a website, but it's only accessible by certain people, and that's usually the employees of the company. In a nutshell. Did I do a good job, Lisa?
You did a great job, Brad.
Excellent. So you guys have done internal training websites, intranet sites for Starbucks, the National Park Service, Intap University. Can you kind of tell us what those kind of companies needed in terms of for internal training? Like what kind of website, what do these websites do?
So the one project that absolutely everybody is curious about, always asks us about, it is the top trafficked portfolio piece on our website, no matter who comes to our website, and that's the Starbucks build, right? Everybody wants to know, because I think everybody's a fan of Starbucks and everybody can relate to that brand. So can I, because I love Starbucks.
She's actually a super fan.
I think I'm a super fan. Is that called a stan? Is that what they call a stan?
Sure.
So Starbucks came to us and they wanted employee training, internal. So this is an intranet, and it is geared towards employee training, which is a system that Starbucks wanted to use, like WordPress and BuddyPress, to train baristas how to make drinks with a particular piece of equipment. In this case, it was the Verismo, I believe. So what they wanted to be able to do was upload videos, like training videos, to show people how to use it, right? This is where you put the coffee, this is how much water you put in, whatever. So they've got these videos, and then after they watch the video, the barista takes a quiz, and they're graded. And in order to move on to the next quiz or the next level or whatever, I think it was like a 70 or 80% proficiency they needed to have on the quiz, something around there. And that would allow them to move on to the next quiz and then to the next quiz. And their managers at the stores were able to view the progress of the barista on how well they are doing, and really kind of dig into any problems that they were having. We used like BuddyPress for their activity feed. We built leaderboards for them. There was gamification involved with badging and achievements. There were a lot of user access rules around the quizzes and who had access. Not only who had access to the results of the barista's tests, but also the barista themselves. There were access rules that we had to build, right? Because if they had to reach an 80% proficiency, you know that the only baristas that should be on the level 2 quiz are the people that got 80% on the level 1 quiz. So just kind of that. And then they just needed like design overall. So we used a variety of things. BuddyPress, we used custom post types, of course, gravity forms, and created a quiz system that the employees could participate in. We also integrated that with a Google Charts API, which allowed the managers to log in and see the statistics on how employees scored.
Very cool. Very cool. So was that for like after they've already started or before you can come to your first day of work kind of thing? Do you know?
I think it was after they started. It was like a
So it's
training.
like a onboarding.
Like, if you were a barista at Starbucks and Starbucks introduced a new piece of equipment while you were working, I mean, you could have worked there for 5 years, but the Verismo is a brand new piece of equipment, and you need to be trained on it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the unicorn Frappuccino was a new drink that everybody's crazy about. So maybe you would take a quiz on how to make the best unicorn Frappuccino in the world. Brad, you tried those unicorn Frappuccinos, didn't you?
I did. I had the zombie one too, and they're literally just sugar. So they look cool, but they're awful.
I mean, I'm a fan of Starbucks, but I never went that far.
I mean, it's cool because like I remember after we rolled this out a few months later, like we could go to any Starbucks and we would always ask like, "Hey, have you done any training on a website, a portal?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I went through that." We're like, "Oh, we built that." And they're like, "Oh, great, that's nice," and then gave us our coffee. But it's still fun to hear like, "Oh yeah, it's actually being used by like literally every barista out there." So it's definitely a really fun project.
Well, if you guys, I mean, you guys serve the enterprise where there's a lot of efficiency and there's Starbucks. I don't know how many Starbucks there are in the world, but
A lot.
when you streamline education, there's huge gains. I mean, most small businesses just kind of throw people to the fire. They'll be like, "Hey, shadow this experienced person," and that's what it is. This is what it looks like at scale with a lot of automation in there. So that's really cool. What about the National Park Service? What was that one like?
So that was a fun project because unique in the sense that it was a government project, and easily, I think we'd maybe done one or two smaller government bids up to that point, but this was certainly easily the largest one that we had done. So that has its own unique set of challenges, which I won't get into because that's not the point of this podcast. But that always stands out to me because it was like our first big government gig. It was fun though. Basically, we built again a portal for the National Park Service. You had to be a member of the National Park Service, and this is primarily for MPS employees like park rangers, things like that. And really, what the goal was like is just a massive like knowledge share, resource sharing, intranet or portal for all of the employees of the Park Service. So. A good example of how they would describe it to us and one of the challenges they were trying to solve is they obviously have a ton of employees all over the U.S., all over the parks, the national parks. Some of these parks are huge, tons of traffic, tons of people, like Yellowstone, for example, and others aren't. They're in more remote locations where there might be like one park ranger that kind of works by themselves and they're really disconnected from the larger MPS, organization. So it was a way to try to bring kind of a social component again with Buddy Press, so that there would be more interaction, especially for those, those poor rangers out there by themselves. They made it was really sad hearing about it. I'm like, so they're just alone all day long, and they're like, oh, they love it. Don't worry. Of course, they're out like in the mountains and like loving nature and stuff. So maybe I'm a little jealous, but. There's definitely kind of a learning aspect to it where they can do some training. There's a help center, a lot of resource sharing, again, cultural resources for employees. There's like internship opportunities. So again, kind of go back to that intranet idea of just a nice employee portal where they can access all the relevant information that they might need. It was a pretty big initiative. Again, all private, all behind the scenes, but the real uniqueness was the government, and things just run differently with budgets, with allocation, timelines, all that stuff. So that was pretty neat. But that was definitely a fun project.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the National Park Service, aside from the fact that it was the National Park Service, I mean, that was just super cool to be involved with. Anyways, but they have their own online learning tool called DOI Talent from the Department of Interior Talent. So we didn't use any like LearnDash or Lifter. We didn't use any like WordPress specific LMS there. But basically what we did is worked with their DOI and Learn to provide access to their online courses. So they also did like face-to-face courses and allowed people to register for in-person courses that they wanted to send their people to. And then they also did webinars. So part of their knowledge library, or their, I guess they called it their commons area, was really resources that employees could tap into, from white papers, just like written documentation, to online courses that they could either register for or just view for free without registering, and then in-person webinars or in-person courses that they could attend. All of those details were filled within the commons in terms of, you know, all of the event logistics that you would expect to be there. But yeah, that was their goal, is to really bring all of their park rangers together. Yeah, they gave us an example of the one singular park ranger guy who's like working in a park on the tippy top of Alaska all by himself. You know, it's really hard, the logistics, to bring that guy in for regular training to DC. So having this portal for those types of employees, and to really make their documentation and resources for training consistent across the board as well, was important. So they used to have these binders of, you can imagine, it's a government, right? So you used to have these office shelves filled with these huge binders of tabbed papers where they would have to go through, and then that was their training material. So you can imagine the logistics of when that stuff updates, getting the new binders up to Alaska and getting them, you know, updated with the most recent information was difficult. So now they've got the online portal that anybody can access.
That's amazing. And you guys probably don't know this about me, but I spent about a decade in Alaska, and I think I might know the guy. I used to run sled dogs in Alaska for a while, and
Wow.
one of the guys that worked for the National Park Service, is the furthest north, is a good friend of mine. He doesn't do that anymore, but
That's the guy.
I might actually know that guy. And everything I knew about his work up there was he was alone. Like he'd just get on the plane, go out into the field, and he was patrolling on dog team doing some.
I'm gonna guess that's 80% the guy we're talking.
Small world.
His name was Zach, but
give us a name. They just described his work environment.
Yeah.
Sounds like
a question about working with governments. I'm seeing more and more people using Lifter sites. Mostly what I'm noticing is at the state level, because you know every state does different things for different government things. What advice do you have for people who are wanting to do client services in the government sector?
Be patient.
Yeah, long sales cycle, or
yeah, I mean that was the one that stands out to me. Is it's a long road to get from initial, you know, discussion to actually either winning or losing the project. You know, they move about as fast as you would expect the government to move. And honestly, there's a lot of similarities, you know, for valid reasons with in the educational space too. But that was one that stood out for me. It's a totally different process for bidding and proposals and all of that. What about you?
Yeah, for bidding, it's completely different because the government has to go with the lowest bid. Like they're required to, because right, they're spending the people's money. So they want to make sure that they're being frugal with that money. So that means that they're not necessarily getting the best, which means the government doesn't always end up with the best front-facing technology.
Except in our case, right, Lisa?
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, when you lose a contract to a government bid, for example, you know, don't be disheartened. Like a lot of times in corporate and business, if we lose a contract, we're upset about it and we want to know who it goes to, but we have to understand that in government bids, it goes to the lowest bidder, period. And there are agencies out there that will just bid low just to get the contract. But Brad's right. I mean, they move about as fast as you would expect government to move, and that doesn't always, that's not limited to the bidding process either. Like I was the point person on the National Park Service, and I love those people. I really, really, really do. But they're government, and they move, you know, you always talk about the wheels of justice moving and turning really slow. so does the government. They move really slow. So we're used to like moving and shaking in the corporate world and the technology, but in government, you just kind of have to sit back and you work at their pace. And, you know, the National Park Service is great because it's a group of academics. There's, you know, anthropologists in there. There's historians in there. It's just super interesting project, but academic. So,
Yeah.
you know, it was fun though. It was a lot of fun. And accessibility is the other thing. If an agency, like if you're working with the government,
It's a biggie.
Accessibility has to be top of mind and strict.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one other thing that stood out to me is at the end of the project, they're also required to do a retrospective that they have to share with the vendor who did the project, which was great. So we got some real raw, honest feedback.
Yeah.
Exactly how they felt about the project at all levels. So you don't always get that, you know, from a client, even though you might ask and try to get it. Sometimes people just don't want to, don't prioritize it or are comfortable doing it, whatever. But you know, it's an official thing that they have to fill out and have on file per the project. So, and we get access to that. So it's really valuable feedback to see how they perceive the project, which by and large was a very successful project. So they were happy.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, tell us about Intap University. What was that one?
Want to take that one, Lisa?
I can take it. Intap is, they're more business, right? They're not government. They're not really education at all. They're business, but they have clients that need to receive access to like educational programs to help them make the most of the investments that they make. So Intap provides software that enables law and accounting and economic consulting firms to kind of leverage data, intelligent automation, and AI. So Intap provides educational programs to help those clients make the most of their investment. So courses are like semi or fully customizable and are led by their in-house people. So with Intap, we use LearnDash, I think, Brad?
Yeah. Are we allowed to say that on this podcast?
Yeah.
I think so. We implemented LearnDash to kind of create those learning pathways for them. And gosh, I'm trying to remember. I'm looking at our portfolio because it was a while ago. They have the different events, like educational events that people can register for, but there's like these learning paths. And again, it's all about progress and course progression within it. And they do require their customers to pay for the courses in Intap University. So we did integrate the Stripe integration with LearnDash, which was really nice. So
Very cool.
I wasn't terribly involved with Intap, Brad. I think you were more involved there than I was.
Yeah, I mean you pretty much covered it. I mean, it's a more traditional kind of LMS. There is the paid component to it around, you know, events and courses and things like that. But yeah.
So one of the buzzwords right now is social learning, and you guys have mentioned BuddyPress, and we run into this a lot. Well, of different social applications in the learning context, whether that's like groups of people taking a course or discussion areas and comments, forums, social feeds on the site, off the site, and social media, group projects, students working together, like having their own kind of like mini mastermind groups and things like that. At your agency, what are you seeing in terms of social, even if it's not just specifically learning related? What's going on with social on the website versus on social media? Are you seeing any trends or things that clients want socially? And how do you see the WordPress website versus the social media group or page or whatever? Like, are people still doing social on the website? Are you seeing that?
It's a good question. So we've been involved with BuddyPress really since before it was BuddyPress, a long time. Always really enjoyed it. It's fun. I always recommend BuddyPress. If you're not familiar with BuddyPress, it's essentially a plugin for WordPress that brings a lot of social networking features to WordPress. So you can basically build your own social network, whether it's public or private. They always call it kind of Facebook in a box, if you will. So we've been a fan of BuddyPress. It's fun. I always recommend BuddyPress if you're looking to contribute into the WordPress world, because it's a lower kind of barrier to entry. It's not as many people working on it, so it's easier to kind of get more directly involved than WordPress. So for years, we've specialized in building BuddyPress websites. A lot of the sites we just talked about have BuddyPress integration. But honestly, like, while we still will work on it, it's still available to work on it. It's the, people looking for BuddyPress or social component, we're just not seeing it as much as we used to. And this really, I think, has been on the downturn, at least from us. And this is just my perspective from what we're seeing and talking to clients, that they're just not, they're not coming to the door asking for that like they used to be. And we talked about a little bit pre-show, but I think, some thoughts around why. It's a little hard to nail, but one thought that I do know comes to mind that some of our clients have run into is just the idea of having a social network and kind of owning your content is awesome and great, and people get excited about it. And the reality of managing a social network, and if it's in an active social network at that, that's a big undertaking. And when I mean managing, like moderating, like making sure that, conversations are appropriate and people have access that should, or maybe areas they shouldn't have access, and just that constant grooming of the content and the social interactions to make sure that it's on topic and appropriate is a lot of work. It's a lot of work if you have an active social network. Look at Facebook. That's obviously on the massive scale, but they can't even figure it out, so, and they have a lot of money. So I think that's probably part of it, is people that were interested have dabbled with it. Maybe they've even tried it. Maybe they've rolled it out and realized, it's not really a set it and forget it type of thing. You have to continually groom it, and that takes time. And a lot of people just don't have the time. So, one thought that might contribute to it. I'm not sure.
What are your thoughts, Lisa, on social?
So in two of the examples that we've talked about today, Intap, Starbucks, National Park Service, there are two of them, Starbucks and the National Park Service, that wanted a sort of social layer where users of their educational program could interact with one another via groups, forums, that type of thing, to form not necessarily study groups, but just kind of a, hey, I'm here, I'm in it with you kind of thing. I'm learning along with you. Let's talk about, any challenges you have, or gripe about the program and its rigid restrictions or whatever. So there is some social layer that both of those clients wanted to provide for their user base, because they thought their user base would benefit from that. Now, some of the challenges of running a social, like forum, groups, things like that, that exist for anybody, is things like moderating and comment spam and all of that kind of stuff. But when you're running an intranet, you really don't run into those problems, because it's an intranet and it's not open and available to every spam bot out there to target your website. Like in the case of the National Park Service, in order to even be able to access it, you had to have an nps.gov and authenticate through their sign-on authentication service. So they don't have those struggles. And even then, they had the problem of moderating sort of those social chatter that went on their website, because not everybody's appropriate, and it's a place of employment, and people were treating it like a online forum, which, sometimes communication can be a little lax. And so they ran into those challenges too, and found that it wasn't going to be as easy for them to do this as they thought it would, because now they need to employ somebody to moderate this program that they've put in place. And so they started thinking twice about doing that. And I think in terms of the types of clients that we do, which are corporate government, moderating the conversation becomes important, because they are places of employment. So whether you have a forum or BuddyPress groups, or even if you're moderating a Twitter chat, on Twitter, or even a Facebook group, like, you always have to be mindful of the appropriateness of the communication that's happening because it is a place of employment. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about moderation. I think people think about like, oh, it'd be great to design this social component, but you got to add management to that layer as well.
You really do.
It's still, I still love it for intranets. I mean, like you said, Lisa, like it's such a great application, and you don't have to use all the features, but just the idea of a little mini social network for a corporation, I think is awesome. It's such a cool idea.
Well,
you guys made it to the mystery round, so.
Are we winning prizes? Are we winning?
So a lot of people that watch this show, if they're one of the things we see causing people to fail across the 5 areas of being an expert, a teacher, a community builder, a technologist, and an entrepreneur is that they try to do too much by themselves for too long. You guys at WebDevStudios, you all should check out WebDevStudios.com and check it out. Click on their team page, and you'll see 40 or 50 smiling faces there. For someone who is trying, you guys are obviously really good at building a team, running a remote company, having a company culture. But so your mystery round question, and you each take a turn at it. What's like one piece of advice for somebody who's needs to build a team? Like how do you build a team and run a remote company successfully? What are a couple key ideas?
That's $1 million question, right? You know, what's funny is like, you know, we've been around for 11 years now. And you know, like we just have always grown organically. So just as we needed to get bigger, we did. And there was never this, you know, 5-10 year super detailed plan from the beginning of, all right, in 2 years we'll be this size and 5 years we'll be this size. It's always just been, let's grow as it's needed. Let's grow smartly with intent, right? That's a big one. But we don't want to grow just to grow, or grow just say, hey, we have, you know, 50 people. Look at us. You know, that's never been appealing to us. So I think from my perspective, the best way to grow, in a very general sense of the answer, I guess, because growing from 1 to 2 people or from, you know, 20 to 50 are very different challenges, but is you obviously need to work with people that are really, especially early on, that are really all in and really buying into what you're trying to do. You know, you need people on your side that are not just, you know, in it for the paycheck necessarily. Now, obviously that's important, but you know, early on, it's important that you have people that are by your side, that truly are buying in and all in to help make it work. As you get bigger, that starts to turn into what we've, you know, established on our side as a leadership team. And these are, you know, in our case, people that have been here for a long time, people that have earned those positions, people have grown into the leaders that they are. And they're, you know, extremely valuable components to what we're doing because they're all in, you know, and so we really value the thoughts, ideas, suggestions, even the criticism that they bring, because we know they're not just punching in at 9 and out at 5 and saying that's all I care about. Like they will do anything they can to make this work, for better or for worse. Like they'll be very raw and honest if we're doing something they don't agree with, and that's great.
And have been.
So a bit of a broad answer, but that's my take. You got to work with people you trust, work with people that are really buying into what you're doing. And ultimately that does form into like a leadership style team.
How about you, Lisa?
Did I take your answer?
You didn't, but I agree 100%, 110% in a rare moment of me agreeing with Brad.
For better or worse, right? The criticism.
Mark this down on your calendar. Just a comment on that is that people are our greatest resource, and that sounds trite, but it is absolutely the truth. We would not be where we are today without the people around us, so it's important to surround yourself with people that you trust. I wouldn't be here if I didn't trust Brad, for example. I do, 100%, no question. But, period. Then my next thing is, from my perspective, I'm the operations at WebDev, Chief Operating Officer. So everything to me is process, workflow, checklists, all this stuff. And when I think back over my time at WebDev, I think we could have probably had an easier time if we would have thought about that growth and what that meant in terms of our process first, rather than growing and then backtracking and trying to create process sort of in response to that growth. So if you know you're going to grow, it is in your best interest to put workflows and processes in place, even minor ones, like a consistent Git workflow for your developers. Make that a thing, you know, so that there are no merge conflicts and everybody's doing it the same way and you know what to do from project to project. So kind of thinking in advance and growing your team in your mind and trying to anticipate what you need in order to be successful with those people and to help those people be successful in helping your business, and getting those processes in place. Like in my mind, process is so important, not as important as relationships with people for sure, but it's a close second.
She's like, you're like the Marcus Lemonis. You guys watch The Prophet? He's always like people, process, product.
Yeah.
You got two of the three there.
That's awesome.
I think a lot of our pain points as a company over the last 5 or 6 years probably could have been mitigated a little bit if we were a little bit more proactive about process. Beautiful. Now I'm just I'm crazy about it. Like
and that's that discovery piece we talked about was not something we were doing as a dedicated required part of our process, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. And now that we are, it has made it's night and day the way we're running projects. So we start off on the right foot versus stumbling out of the gate and then somehow making it across the finish line. We're starting out in a really solid place because of that discovery, which is part of our process. So,
well, and it's a waterfall effect, because when we have a consistent discovery process, you know, at the end of that discovery process, we have a document that serves as a roadmap for our developers. So when our developers are hopping into a project, they know what to expect. They're not hopping into the great unknown. They know what to expect. They know they're going to get a document. They know they're going to get a roadmap. They know they're going to get tasks to complete, and how much time they need to complete those tasks. I mean, it's very, I don't want to say it's regimented because it's not really that strict, but it is very much of a process that we follow from project to project. And it's a formula that works really well for us.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you guys for coming on the show. That's Lisa Sabin-Wilson and Brad Williams from WebDevStudios. You can find them at WebDevStudios.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I don't remember last time Lisa and I did a podcast together. So
it's been a long time.
It's a special show today.
And that was the first mystery round. So you guys did great. You guys did fantastic.
Because you said we made it. So I was kind of curious if other people didn't make it to that round and what happened.
And that's a wrap for this episode of LMScast. I'm your guide, Chris Badgett. I hope you enjoyed the show. This show was brought to you by LifterLMS, the #1 tool for creating, selling, and protecting engaging online courses to help you get more revenue, freedom, and impact in your life. Head on over to LifterLMS.com and get the best gear for your course creator journey. Let's build the most engaging, results-getting courses on the internet.